Hi there, I'm Gracie Allee and I'm a competitive mounted archer living in South Texas. So the sport of mounted archery, I guess I will start with the history and then move into the modern day stuff. So historically, it was used for hunting and warfare because, I mean, if you are going into a battle and you need to shoot that guy way over there, why not do it with your horse running that way, far away from that guy? So that's kind of how mounted archery was used historically. It was used for warfare, it was used for hunting, and it was used by all societies, every which way, Mongolians, Native Americans, just anything you can think of basically used mounted archery as a tactic. In the past, I want to say 20 years is when it started to pick up heavily in Hungary and Korea. I think Korea in the past 20 years. And all kind of internationally. Here in the United States, it very lightly started to pick up. It caught on for a little bit and then it kind of went away and then it came back. So it probably early 2000s is really when it started coming into the United States kind of regularly. People started actually being like, hey, this would be fun to compete in. So they made up competitions and they'd go compete with each other. And you have to understand this sport was and still is pretty small. So you got to travel quite a ways to compete. So it's really neat that all those people got together, were like, hey, let's compete, let's do this. And you know, you got people coming in Michigan to Texas, California to Georgia, I mean every which way. So that's a really neat fact about the sport. I want to say in the past 4 years is when it really started picking up heavily as a sport, where there's more clinicians, there's more coaches, there are just more resources to everything in general, more resources to horse bows, arrows, all sorts of stuff that, you know, people need specifically for mounted archery. So that's kind of how the sport has grown these days. I mean, historically speaking, I think the sport has done an awesome way of just keeping up that aspect of how, you know, horses and archery were used, you know, a long time ago. And nowadays we have two different types of horse archery, I'd like to say. There's the sports track where you have barriers around you and your horse and you ride down this track. Some courses require you to go really, really fast, like the Korean courses. You're supposed to ride as fast as possible, and you shoot, for some courses you just shoot 1 arrow, for some courses you shoot 5 arrows. And they can be sideways, they can be forward, and they can be backwards. They're usually on just the one side of the track. So I'm left-handed, so I shoot this way. The right-handed folk come down the other side of the track and they'll shoot right-handed. So that's the sports track summed up. There's also horseback field archery, which is what I really love. And that's where you take all these barriers down. There's no straight track and you're out in a field. They set up gates that you have to go through, but obviously the horse is not barriered in. It can go whichever way you want. And they set up targets. Targets on both the sports track and field archery can be anywhere from 7 meters to probably about 50 meters. So that's kind of the range. And with the field archery, so you have a starting point, you go and you'll run around and then you come back to that starting point, or there's, you know, a start point and a finish point. More commonly though, I've seen a start point that is also the same end point. And so what they do is they send you out there and there are gates you are required to go through and targets that you are required to shoot. If you miss the required gate, you're DQ'd. If you miss the target, you obviously don't get those target points. And so with the field archery, your horse isn't barriered in. So you are guiding your horse solely through that track with your legs. And there is no walking in horseback archery. There is no trotting in horseback archery. You have to be at a canter or a gallop to be competitive in it. And so you're galloping your horse in an open field. You're having to go through certain barriers. I mean, there's turns, there's zigzags, there's all sorts of neat stuff. Sometimes they'll send you through the woods. I mean, it is a really neat aspect of the sport. And so that is kind of the two defining factors in mounted archery right now. Of course, the horseback field archery courses that are through the woods, we call them cross-country courses, because then they take away the gates and you just got to run through the woods and shoot the targets you're supposed to shoot at. So that's just kind of the basics of mounted archery right there. I got into mounted archery. It's kind of an interesting story. I've been riding horses forever. As long as I can remember, none of my family's ever been into horses, but I have always loved riding horses. I've done all sorts of disciplines, Western, English, barrels, jumping, dressage, I mean, you name it. And I started shooting a bow probably about 5 years ago now. No clue that mounted archery was even a sport, and I was living in Dallas at the time. I moved from Dallas to New Braunfels, Texas, and that's when I learned about mounted archery. I learned that it was a real sport, it was legitimate. I found a facility near me that actually taught the sport, and so that's kind of when I got hooked. Probably about 2 weeks after my first lesson, I was like, all right, I gotta go to a competition. I gotta see what this thing's about. So I flew to Atlanta and competed in my first competition. I got 6th overall, I think. It was amazing. That's when I got hooked. It was after that competition because there was this course. It was set up running through the woods. And so you took your horse and you ran through the woods and you just shot targets that were placed throughout the woods. And for me, that was the most fun thing I had ever done in my entire life. And that's kind of how my journey in mounted archery began. And it's just been a wild ride ever since. All right, so my passion really does lie in the horseback field archery. For me, there's nothing more freeing than being able to get on my horse, ride her in an open field, and shoot targets every which way and make turns, all while doing this hands-free. And for me, that's really where my passion is. I love being able to teach that. I love taking riders who have never been able to do this sort of thing with their horses and teaching them, hey, this is a real thing, you can do it. And letting them ride around a field with their horse, that's really amazing. And so the horseback field archery aspect really is what I love. I mean, there's nothing more freeing than being able to do that. For me, I also do love competing. That is something I love to do. I've been competing for the past 3 years. I've been all over the country. I went to the World Horseback Archery Championships in South Korea in 2018, and that was an amazing experience. I cannot wait to go back to a competition like that. Right now, I am currently 11th on the national ranking, I think, and so I am I think the highest ranking minor in the sport right now, and I'm really excited about this sport. I love it so much. It's taught me so many different things about riding, about shooting, about working hard. It's taught me everything. This sport is really amazing. I have, my goal is to be in the top 5 mounted archers by next year. That's my goal. We'll see if I get there. But I really do. I love teaching this sport. I love the horseback field archery. I love competing. There's so much about it that I just love to do. I mean, who gets to go into work every day and it's like, okay, I'm going to teach somebody how to ride and shoot off their horse? Who gets that job? It's really amazing. And so I really love that about this sport. And so my passion is everywhere in this sport. I am passionate about every single aspect of the sport. I mean, it's so hard for me to say just one thing because, the mounted archery community, it is such a tight-knit community right now. Everybody knows everybody. And I love showing up in another state, heck, sometimes another country, and being like, hey, I know you, hey, I know you, hey, we're friends, hey, I get to see you every now and then. It's really neat, and you meet so many neat people, and It's the hardest question to ask me, what am I passionate about in the sport? Because I'm kind of passionate about everything in the sport, because it has turned into my life in the past 3 years. This is what I do, and I mean, this is what I see myself doing for the rest of my life, is teaching and competing and doing this because I love it so much. You meet some amazing horses, amazing people, you get to do amazing things. So yeah, what's not to love about it? Alrighty guys, equipment time. This here is a Korean bow, or Korean horse bow. So the rules for horse bows competitively is they are not allowed to have an arrow rest. So your arrow has to lay on either your thumb or your knuckle, depending on which release you're using. If you're shooting a thumb release, it's gonna lay over your thumb and you're gonna pull back the string with your thumb here. When you pull back the string with your thumb, you're gonna want something to protect it most of the time. There's some people I know that are super tough and they don't need anything to protect themselves, but I shoot a 50-pound bow. I don't like shooting that with my bare hands, so I'll either use a thumb ring here and it just sits on your thumb and you'll draw it back, or I'll use a leather glove for, you know, a protection on the thumb. Same thing if you're gonna shoot on this side of the bow. This side of the bow would be a Mediterranean release, and you can wear a glove or you can wear nothing. I like to wear a glove because I don't like to bust up my fingers. So this is just a Korean bow, and obviously you can shoot all the different bows any way you want. This here is my original bow. It is a Skydog bow made by Audentes Archery. It's based off the Plains Indians style shooting, and anyway, it's really neat. It's got a beautiful gull wing shape to it. And I also have here this triangle shaped bow. It's also made by Audentes Archery. It's also based off a Native American style bow, which is very neat because that's what we try to represent American history whenever we leave the country to compete. So that's kind of how this runs for the equipment. This triangle shaped bow obviously shoots a lot faster than this shape of a bow, just because of the way that it is tillered and angled. Bows are made of all sorts of different stuff. There's no regulation for that in mounted archery. Sometimes we have bows that are solid wood. Sometimes we have bows that are carbon, composite, I mean all sorts of things. Personally, all of my bows are, or all my competitive bows are carbon and bamboo, and so that's what shoots best for me. These here are my quivers, and this is what holds my arrows when I'm on horseback. I just, I'll shove a couple arrows in there and I can pull from either side, shoot any way I want. And last but not least, I always recommend one of these. I know a lot of people do not like to ride with helmets, but I have hit my head quite a few times coming off of horses while riding and shooting, and trust me, this has saved me a lot of damage that would have been done. So I strongly recommend riding with a helmet. Personally, if you're thinking of getting a bow, I will always recommend Audentes Archery. Those are the best bows. That bow will last you a lifetime if you take care of it. So they're really good bows. If you're just wanting to try out and figure out what kind of weight you like in a bow, how long you like the bow, I do recommend a bow from Freddie Archery. They have some good, bows. That way you can test out before you buy something that's super nice, custom build, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's basically kind of the rundown on equipment we use. Everybody's got different equipment that they use. Not everybody uses this. This is just what I use personally and what works for me. But there's all sorts of stuff, or all sorts of equipment that can be found if you just look up horseback archery equipment, horse bows, that kind of thing. The arrows, I know that some people are curious about. So this here is not your regular arrow. It's really fluffy, so it is a flu-flu arrow, and it's the arrow we use whenever we shoot at what's called the kabak. And it is a target that is up in the air, and it's a symbol, and you shoot at it. So these bigger arrows, or these bigger feathers, slow it down, so that way when it hits the ground, it doesn't hurt anybody too hard if somebody was to accidentally be under that. and we also use blunt tips. Now, with regular targets that are not, you know, above your head, we use just regular arrows with field points. Personally, I like Victory Archery. They shoot really fast and really clean off all my Attila bows, and so those are the arrows I go with. So that's kind of just the basic rundown for horse archery equipment. Alrighty, so horses for mounted archery. This here is Diana. She is a 6-year-old Arabian, and she is my personal mounted archery horse. I've seen people use 20-year-old horses. I've seen people use very young horses. It really depends on your preference and what you want, you know, with your mounted archery horse. Personally, for me, I don't trailer this horse outside of Texas. So whenever I go and I compete out of state, I don't take my horse with me. I fly in. And I get what I get, which sometimes they're great horses, sometimes they're crazy horses. And so it really depends. I've been lucky enough to have a lot of really good horses. It's really neat to ride all the different types of horses people like. Last October, I was on a big giant Clydesdale mixed horse, and he was amazing. He was absolutely phenomenal. We rode through the woods. We did stuff on the sports track, and he did amazing. He was an amazing horse. Personally though, I like really short horses. That's easy to get on and off of, because when you're out training by yourself in a field, you have to remember that, oh, I have to pull my arrows. So you have to get off your horse and pull all your arrows and then get back on your horse. So I like something that's easy on the knees. But yeah, basically any kind of horse works as long as it's not dangerous, not crazy, and you really do need it to be able to collect at a canter. That's something they got to be able to learn. Saddles. So I obviously have her saddle right now. She is wearing a dressage saddle, which is what I like to use. It has a nice deep seat for all of my equestrians out there that know what I'm talking about. So it's really secure for riding. Some people do ride in Western saddles. I don't recommend it. I started off doing horse archery in a Western saddle and ended up fracturing my pelvis twice, because when you shoot, you stand up a little bit to get that traction in your knees, so that way you're not bouncing around. And I actually did have a horse throw on the brakes, and then I had another one spin out, and I came forward and I cracked my pelvis on that, and that was no fun. So I don't recommend the Western saddle. There's people out there that are really cool and they get these awesome custom-made mounted archery saddles. Personally, I love my Wintec saddle, and so that's what I stick with. It fits a lot of different horses. It's comfortable on this horse's back, and so that's what happens as far as saddles go. And I mean, that's kind of your basics for what you need in a horse and what you need with saddles. I know a lot of people that get into the sport that don't know how to ride. In fact, that's most of my students. Is they shot maybe once or twice in their life, and they've been on a horse or a trail ride or something once before, but they don't know how to ride, and so they want to get in this sport. But I strongly recommend taking some riding lessons before you get into the sport, because you got to be able to do a lot of important stuff with your legs that only a riding instructor can teach you how to do and do well. All right, so the future of mounted archery, that's a really good question. I think in the next 5 years, we're gonna really see some good growth in it. There's lots of people getting into this sport that are now starting to spread it, start to become clinicians and coach like me and do all sorts of stuff and promote it on social media and do demos. So I think that's really gonna help out the sport in this long run. You know, in the past 3 years, it's exploded thanks to social media, oddly enough. You know, of course, you know, you're scrolling through Facebook, you're like, what is that lady doing? You know, you click on the picture, you realize she's shooting off a horse at a gallop, and then you click like, you go to the page, and then you realize, oh, these people offer lessons. And that's really, that's how the sport grows. And I've personally been working on trying to get more sponsors into the sport, more names into the sport, like Victory Archery. I got them to sponsor me some arrows. Troxel Helmets has been kind enough to help sponsor or to help give helmets to some folks who win competitions, which is really neat, because that's a really neat thing. It's amazing to be able to show these people, like, hey, look at this awesome sport that I do. Do you guys want to be a part of it? And I find that really neat. Mounted archery is such a close-knit group of people right now. Everybody knows everybody, and I think that's great for the sport, because then we can all get with each other, talk to each other. We're all in every single corner of the country. Everybody's every which way, but we can all still talk to each other and be like, okay, hey, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to convene. Obviously we do have one national organization, MA3, and then a second national organization, Hausa. But it's great to have these individual instructors that they go out and they're, working to spread this sport. And, it really is, the sport is trending in a great way. I don't see mounted archery losing its cool anytime soon. So I would expect to see it get more and more popular over the next 5 years, to where, every weekend somewhere within a couple, maybe not, 30 miles, but not too far where it's impossible to get to, that you can get to a mounted archery event. Depending on where you live, I think, this sport is really going to excel, where, people in my area, my goal for my area is that in the next 3 years, I want to have it where we have basically jackpots set up, every other weekend or something like that, where you can go out and play and do some mounted archery, where it's, it's similar to like having a barrel racing event or a jumping event for the weekend, something little where you can play around with it. So yeah, I'm hoping that that's going to happen. It really looks like it is. We're getting more people into the sport that are so passionate about it. They are so good at it, and they're really wanting to spread this, everything that's going on here. And so I really don't see mounted archery falling out of play anytime soon.